There's a really curious sign just up ahead and it makes no sense whatsoever. Now, I've long been fascinated with this particular sign, not because it says Smugglers Lane, although that's pretty cool, but moreover because of the exact location we're in right now. You see, if this place really was used for smugglers and the like, well then something really significant doesn't add up, because we're at least 35 miles away from the coast in that direction, and we'd have to probably go maybe 30-40 miles in that direction to make that smuggling worthwhile. And then, whilst looking for that sign, I found that. Now that there is a significant pit in the ground, man-made. It's completely brick lined. It's probably 10 foot deep and maybe a 10 foot sort of square, and it's very old, at least 150 years old. Now, I'm not saying this was used for smuggling. This could well be sort of an ice store, but with no houses here, it makes you wonder, who knows? So I decided to find out why this was a Smugglers Lane and were there any more like it. I started mapping these strange names across Britain: Smugglers Lane, Smugglers Way, Smugglers Hole, Cutthroat Lane. Were there genuinely any linked to smuggling? And of course, if these routes are then real, where exactly are they going? Okay, I'll be honest, I did assume that these would indeed turn out to be folklore, but the more I mapped these places and understood them, well, the less accidental this felt altogether, and actually this journey made me completely reevaluate how I saw the landscape. So the first thing I wanted to do is work out if this lane is actually old, because here in Britain we've got this wonderful way of preserving and romanticising things that weren't necessarily true. So was this used for smuggling or not? Now straight away there's a lovely feel to this. We've got steep banks either side. This is very much nestled in a very small valley. We love the idea of the smuggler: hidden coves, barrels, brandy, lanterns on cliff tops. Entire pubs are themed around it. So there was every chance that Smugglers Lane was simply folklore attached to this old road. Now at first glance it did seem that the folklore side of things was winning here for one significant reason. Well, it turns out historically this lane wasn't even called Smugglers Lane. For centuries before, it appears to have been known as Monkdean Lane. So my immediate thought was, well, that's game over. Had someone just renamed this to make it sound a bit more exciting than what it actually was? Or was there some genuine truth behind it after all? It turns out, despite being miles inland, smuggling absolutely did happen here. Come and have a look at this. Now, we do have records of smuggling activity here. One local story centres around a building now known as Smuggler's Cottage, which is that cottage, I think, right there through the trees. Now, whether or not those stories are exactly true to all their detail that it gives, well, all of a sudden now, the more important thing is we're associating folklore with inland routes, not just the sea. In the 1700s, southern England had a serious smuggling problem. Heavy taxes on goods like tobacco, tea, lace, brandy made illegal imports incredibly profitable. You see, once contraband came ashore, well, it would often be moved throughout the night, through wooded areas, through old trackways, through deep valleys, and all of a sudden, this place right here is making a bit more sense. You see, across Britain, especially southern Britain, where these strange names started to appear everywhere on the map. Smugglers Lane, Smugglers Way, Smugglers Hole, Smugglers Well, Cheaters Lane, Cutthroat Lane, Robbery Bottom Lane, the list goes on. They were absolutely everywhere, and for me, maybe that was the light bulb moment. We aren't now looking at individual tales and folklores from local stories. We're actually looking at a long lost hidden network. So here's where things got interesting, because I thought naturally the best thing to do now would be to map as many of these as I could and take a good look. And I say I mapped them, well actually you lot did, because I asked you on social media to come up with as many of these names as you possibly could. Now that's when things got to get really strange, because you came up with hundreds of different variations. I'd not even considered Smugglers Lane, Smugglers Way, Smugglers Ditch, Smugglers Dyke, Smugglers Hole, Smugglers Road. Then it got even weirder. Good Thieves Lane, Robbery Bottom Lane, Cutthroat Lane, Fish Towers Lane in Totnes, not sure that's the right pronunciation, but certainly linked with smuggling fish. And at first I genuinely thought some of this had to be a complete coincidence. Britain has thousands of old place names after all. But then when you start to look at those individual places, the individual lanes or roads or whatever they were, well, they kind of cluster in a way where you'd expect them to be. Those quiet lanes, those wooded areas, always away from the local town or city. Okay, well this is great, because now all of a sudden Smugglers Lane, the place we first visited in North Hampshire, well that's starting to make a bit more sense now based on its position in the landscape, despite being 30-35 miles north of the coast. This is really exciting now, because I'm building this spreadsheet and I wonder how many of these places I can link together and find this secret network we refer to. Okay, so by this point, and with my whole spreadsheet and map well underway now, well, it started to feel like a lot less individual isolated cases of folklore. This does indeed look like a big network, if you ask me. Now, there was one place that kept on propping up and up time and time again, and it was this place, the New Forest. Now, even by southern Britain standards, this place can feel very isolated. The New Forest is covered in either vast swathes of heathland or vast swathes of forest, and of course we have 100 trackways and old routeways disappearing into these trees and many others around here. By the 1700s, smuggling in southern England had become an industrial scale business. Places like Keyhaven, Christchurch, the Western Solent became notorious landing spots for contraband. Now, once the goods were ashore, the next part was the extremely dangerous part, getting away from the coast and inland as soon as you possibly could. The risk of capture on the coast was extremely high, and of course if you did get caught, well, the punishment was extremely severe. Well, the solution was to move inland, and the New Forest was almost perfect for this. A vast landscape of woodland, of heathland, of isolated trackways sits perfectly between that dangerous coast from the smuggler's point of view and of course inland Hampshire and beyond. Really sparse settlements here and really difficult terrain. Quiet routes cutting north through the landscape, and those places started appearing repeatedly on accounts of smuggling activity. Now, one particular source kept on referring to the routes coming inland up through the New Forest. In fact, it named a few lanes that skirted around Fordham Bridge and then on towards the northwest of the New Forest, and one particular name there kept on propping up. Cranbourne, sitting on the northwest edge of the New Forest, and when you look at this and places like it, well, it starts to feel like it's kind of a gateway out of the forest and the south. Now, that house there pictured, well, that was occupied for a time by the local customs officer, which suggests the authorities clearly understood the movement through this area and it was becoming a serious problem. So for me now, I kind of feel like the understanding of this whole smuggling era has changed, because I always thought it was about the coast. I always thought that that was where 90% of the story was, but I wonder if it's actually the other way around. I wonder if 90% of the story is actually inland, because here's the next oddity. The more I learned about all of these routes and the lanes and the ways, the surprisingly large amount of those I found followed borders. Specifically county and parish borders, cutting across the landscape just like this one. This one specifically is a really good example. This is Smugglers Lane, so we definitely have the association with the word smugglers, and if you take that line of the lane there, this side we have Wiltshire and this side we have Hampshire, and it follows this lane for quite a few miles on this border. Now, at first, as I said, I thought this was a coincidence. Britain has thousands of old roads and really strange place names after all. And then the more you start looking into exactly how smuggling took place in the 1700s, well, then the more you can see this is no longer a coincidence. This is definitely a real thing. Smugglers Lane, or Smugs Lane, sitting right on top of a border for quite a few miles. And law enforcement back then was very different to what it was today. We have no big joined up national system. Everything was done on a smaller scale without the technology, of course. Now, depending on the area, you could have had magistrates, you could have had parish constables, or certainly customs and revenues officers. Jurisdiction was down to certain areas. Now, the smugglers, well, they knew this, and they knew if they could take advantage of places like this, Smugglers Lane, which straddled the borders of two different jurisdictions, where they can scout between the two depending on where they're being chased from. In the 1700s, smuggling was such a problem, it became embedded within communities. We see further to the east the Hawkhurst gang and how they would often fight with these revenue officers, how they would intimidate entire towns. Now, that may all sound a little bit dramatic, but in reality I think the problem was actually even bigger than that. By the mid-1700s, smuggling had become so widespread that entire communities were accused of being involved. Farmers, labourers, innkeepers, carters, and even local officials. Okay, so we need to untangle this mess with three big questions. Let's head to the final chapter. Questions. 1. Where are these routes going? 2. Is there a joined up, long forgotten network? And 3. What exactly was that hole in the ground for? And by the mid-1700s, smuggling had got so out of hand that the authorities themselves were trying to reshape the entire landscape to try and deal with the problem. Sections of Cranbourne Chase were reportedly cleared in part to make movement easier to monitor. By 1742, it's estimated around 80% of the tea drank in Britain had no duty paid on it. And of course we know how important tea is to us Brits. Now that kept on raising the question that I've been asking over and over: if these smuggling routes were in use, exactly where was it going? Now the biggest issue we have with none of this was actively recorded until it was too late. Smugglers' lanes were only recorded retrospectively and therefore were obviously not called smugglers' lanes when they were in use. So my answer is thus: they're everywhere. I suspect I'm only seeing 1% of the entire picture of smuggling here in Britain. A lot of these places, as I keep saying, definitely fitted into the landscape that would fit that very need of the smuggler. And with that, the routes, the network, is there one? So I haven't looked at this map and tried to join dots and make routes and paths. Well, you can do that. We have one clear theme. These places, these lanes, are always avoiding towns, cities and populated areas. So these routes and lanes are all going both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. What I've seen so far, I'm sure, is truly now the tip of the iceberg. But also, let us not forget places of refuge and storage. We see the smugglers' houses along some of these routes as well from very long ago. Now finally, that hole in the ground we found at the start of the video, that remains a mystery, but I'll tell you what it's not and then you can try and guess. Number one, it's not an ice house. It's below ground, not big enough, and we have no houses anywhere near us on the map going back quite some time. Number two, it's not any kind of lime pit or associated working because we have no evidence of firing. So number three, my only sort of solution was it's something to do with water, but again, we're miles from anywhere. Let me know your thoughts below. I've been Paul from Smugglers Lane. Click subscribe and we'll see you this time next week.